Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopidana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Gopidana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Gopidana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Yasodhanandana Radha-dana-ranjana Jaya Radha-dana-ranjana Yasodhanandana Radha-dana-ranjana Jaya Radha-dana-ranjana Yamunadiravarachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Yamunadiravarachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Yamunadiravarachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Gopijana Vallabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana. Yam Sodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravachari Jaya Kunja Bihari. Yamuna Tiravachari Jaya Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Brahmadakshariya Asadhara Sadhushi Shiman. His Divine Grace Shalai Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hariva Slava Zabrani Bhakta Slava Shri Guru Shri Gurangi. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Srimate Bhakti-vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatya De Siddharane Om Agana Dvinandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Vrijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakans Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchina Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishubhanu Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Trivyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitinanda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 4, Ambrish Maharaj offended by Durvasa Muni. And we begin with the text 30, which has no purport, so I'm just going to read the translations. In the month of Kartik, after observing that vow for 1 year, after observing a fast for 3 nights, and after bathing in the Jamuna, Maharaj Ambrisha worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, and Madhuvana. Following the regular principles of Mahabhisheka, Maharaj Ambrisha performed the bathing ceremony for the deity of Lord Krishna with all paraphernalia. Then he dressed the deity with fine clothing, ornaments, fragrant flower garlands, and other paraphernalia for worship of the Lord. With attention and devotion, he worshipped Krishna and all the greatly fortunate brahmanas who were free from material desires. Thereafter, Maharaj Ambrisha satisfied all the guests who arrived at his house, especially the brahmanas. He gave in charity 60 crores of cows whose horns were covered with gold plates and whose hooves were covered with silver plate. So how many is 60 crores? How much is a crore? It's 10 million. So that's 600 million cows. It's about as many cows as there are people in the European Union. All the cows were well decorated with garments and had full milk bags. They were mild-natured, young and beautiful, and were accompanied by their calves. After giving these cows, the king first sumptuously fed all the brahmanas, and then when they were fully satisfied, he was about to observe the end of Ekadasi with their permission by breaking the fast. Exactly at that time, however, Durvasa Muni, the great and powerful mystic, appeared on the scene as an uninvited guest. After standing up to receive Durvasa Muni, King Ambrisha offered him a seat and paraphernalia of worship. And sitting at his feet, the king requested the great sage to eat. Durvasa Muni gladly accepted the request of Maharaj Ambrisha, But to perform the regular ritualistic ceremonies, he went to the river Jamuna. There he dipped in the water of the auspicious Jamuna and meditated upon the impersonal Brahman. In the meantime, only a muhurta of the Dwadasi day was left on which to break the fast. Consequently, it was imperative that the fast be broken immediately. In this dangerous situation, the king consulted learned brahmanas. So we'll read text 40. Brahmanati krame dosho Dvadasyam yad aparine yat kritva sadume bhuyad adharmova namam sprishat. Brahmanati krame dosho Dvadasyam yad aparine yat kritva sadume bhuyad adharmova namam sprishat. Ladies. Brahmana adikrame. In surpassing the rules of respect to the brahmanas. Dosha, there is a fault. Dvadasyam, on the Dwadasi day. Yat, because. Aparine, not breaking the fast in the time. Yat kritva, after doing which action. Sadhu, what is auspicious. May, unto me. Bhuyat, may so become. Adharmaha, what is irreligious. Va, either. Na, not. Mum, unto me. Sprishet, may touch. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The king said, to transgress the law of respectable behavior toward the brahmanas is certainly a great offense. On the other hand, if one does not observe the breaking of the fast within the time of Dwadasi, there is a flaw in one's observance of the vow. Therefore, O brahmanas, if you think it will be auspicious and not irreligious, I shall break the fast by drinking water. In this way, after consulting with the brahmanas, the king reached his decision. For according to Brahminical opinion, drinking water may be accepted as eating and also as not eating. Purport, when Maharaj Ambrisha, in his dilemma, consulted the brahmanas about whether he should break the fast or wait for Durvasa Muni, apparently they could not give a definite answer about what to do. A Vaishnava, however, is the most intelligent personality. Therefore, Maharaj Ambrisha himself decided, in the presence of the brahmanas, that he would drink a little water. For this would confirm that the fast was broken, but he would not transgress the laws for receiving a brahmana. In the Vedas it is said, Apos nati tan naiva shitam naiva na shitam. This Vedic injunction declares that drinking of water may be accepted as eating or as not eating. Sometimes in our practical experience, we see that some political leader adhering to satyagraha will not eat but will drink water. Considering that drinking water would not be eating, Maharaj Ambrish decided to act in this way. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhakti-vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatyade Satarne. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Trivida narakasyedam dwaram nashitam atmanaha kama krodha tata lobhas tasmat etam trayam chaget. There are three gates leading to hell, namely lust and anger and greed, that every sane person should become free from these three gates because they lead to the degradation of the self. Etanyapi tu karmani. No. Etan vimukta kontiya trivida narakasyedam. Etan vimukta kontiya trivida narakasyedam. Etera vimukta kontiya trivida bhavati priya. Etera vimukta kontiya tamodvara srivira nira acharatyamanashrayas tato yati param gatim. A man who escaped these three gates of hell, O son of Kunti, performs acts conducive to self-realization, thus attains to the supreme destination. Etera vimukta kontiya tamodvara srivira nira acharatyamanashrayas tato yati param gatim. The main problem we have is tamas, as is explained here. Etera vimukta kontiya. So liberation means to get free from ignorance. Ignorance of, and ultimately ignorance means that we think that we're something separate from Krishna. And therefore we act as if we seem to be acting. Actually what we're doing is we're desiring. As soon as we desire and we don't dovetail our desires with Krishna's desire, then we dovetail our desires with material desires. And material desires are of three main varieties, and of course they have their manifestations. But the main beginning desires are kama, krodha, tata, lobhas, lust, anger, and greed. They're not the only material desires, but they're the preliminary desires that give birth to all the other desires, all the other conceptions also. That if one follows lust, then greed will follow, and when greed follows, inevitably, anger will follow. And when anger follows frustration, then delusion comes. And in delusion we forget and we lose our intelligence, and we act in such a way as to degrade ourselves, degrade our consciousness. One may, in the estimation of people in the material world, be advancing, but in the estimation of the spiritual world, one is becoming degraded. Accumulation of material assets, even material knowledge, is not considered to be an achievement, a progressive achievement, if it's not accompanied by the progression of consciousness. And ultimately the consciousness is to understand things as they actually are. And the things as they actually are is that the little tiny soul, he simply has the capacity to desire. What he desires is not, he doesn't have any independent desires. Either he can dovetail his desires with that of Krishna's, or he'll be forced to dovetail his desires with that of the material nature. In other words, we're always being presented with opportunities at every moment. Either we can take either material nature is offering an opportunity to satisfy lust, anger, or greed, or Krishna is offering us an opportunity to even, when we want to satisfy lust, anger, and greed, we can do it in Krishna's service. Just like to satisfy lust, one may eat prasadam, one may be greedy, as Ramananda Roy said, one may be greedy to accumulate Krishna consciousness. And one may become angry at the enemies of Krishna. Then one will not fall into delusion. On the other hand, if one acts without consultation with Krishna, in other words, consultation with Krishna means to become jignasu, inquisitive. Generally, people are inquisitive how to gratify their senses, and therefore they want their intelligence from Krishna, how to do that. But that's not actually spiritual intelligence, that's simply material intelligence. That spiritual intelligence comes when we ask Krishna what to do, and then Krishna tells us, like he told Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Cetasa sarva karmani, maya sanyasya matparaha, buddhi yogam upashitya, matshita sadatam bhava. That in all activities depend upon me and work always under my protection in such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So, it's a progression. The first intelligence we have is we understand and eventually accept that everything here belongs to Krishna. I also belong to Krishna. Without that, any consciousness other than that is called material consciousness. Now, we may theoretically hear that, but it doesn't become realized until we start utilizing things in Krishna's service. Someone may know, for instance, they walk into a store, they may know nothing here belongs to me, they may know who the proprietor is, but they steal anyhow. They put everything in their pocket anyhow that they can. So they know who the proprietor is, but they're still thieves, and they're still liable to punishment. If they get caught and they're asked, well, why did you steal? Didn't you know it belonged to someone? So someone would say, oh, I didn't know it belonged to anyone. And someone else would say, sure, I know it belongs to someone, but, anyhow, he has enough, I need something too. Why should he be so greedy? Probably the person who knows nothing, he'll probably be more likely to get a more lenient sentence. The person who arrogantly knows that everything belongs to some proprietor, yet he steals anyhow. So, Krishna has provided Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra in order to direct us how we should utilize his energy. Even we hear theoretically there's a God, and that God is the proprietor of everything. Still, people, they say they're religious, but they don't follow God's instructions or his representative's instructions. Prabhupada appreciated Christianity, but he didn't appreciate when they didn't follow Jesus Christ's instructions, especially thou shalt not kill. Or when they changed thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. When thou shalt not kill human beings. And of course now they probably changed that too. That, well, shall not kill thy dog. Everyone else is fair game. And even the dog is in difficulty sometimes. So one has to find, if one accepts that there is a proprietor, one has to find out what the proprietor wants us to do with his energy, with whatever belongs to him. Otherwise, one becomes a thief. And the material thief is punished by the material nature because material nature punishes one by putting one into the material concept of life. Now, one may be proud of having a nice material life, but it's material life nonetheless. And if one doesn't utilize that life in such a way as to get out of the material concept of life, then one will probably be put into a lower species of life. And there one will be forced to act according to lust, anger, and greed, And there won't be any alternative. One will simply have to wait to come back to the human form of life again. But in the human form of life, one has the opportunity to understand what we're supposed to do with God's energy. If we accept that there is a God, then what do we do with it? And therefore Shastra tells us, and Guru and Sadhu tells us according to the time, place, and audience what to do. And ultimately what we should do, when we find out what to do, then we should do it to please Krishna. So when we're doing it to please, when we accept Krishna owns everything, and we find out what Krishna wants us to do, and we do it to please Him, then we become, Krishna appears in our memory. He reveals Himself to us. That's called real intelligence. Naham prakasha sarvasha yogamaya samavrita mudo yam nabijananti loko yam ajam avyam. That I'm never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. So those who are foolish, they don't know that there's a God. They're called mudhas. And those who are supposedly very intelligent, like the impersonalists, they're also unintelligent because they don't do anything to please Krishna. Therefore, they never realize Krishna never reveals Himself to them. And Krishna, they continue to be covered by the illusory energy of Krishna. Although they may be proud that they think they're liberated, but vimukta maninas, they're actually not liberated. They're still in the material concept of life. They may know what they're not. They may even know that they're not their body, but they don't know who they are. Therefore, they're also unintelligent to some degree. Abhibuddha vishuddhaya. Their intelligence is unclear. Now here Ambarish Maharaj is consulting with the Brahmins. Brahmins mean Brahmanyatiti Brahmanaha. They know that they're not their body, but they don't necessarily know their relation with Krishna. And therefore, although they may know the Vedic conjunctions, and they act strictly according to the Vedic conjunctions, but in this instance they were a little confused what to do. But Ambarish Maharaj, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, who was always engaged in Krishna's service, Krishna gave him the intelligence what to do. And therefore he sipped a little water, he remembered the Vedic conjunction. Drinking is eating, but not eating. It is eating, but it's not eating gross food. Dhruva Maharaj, he fasted first by only eating kapita fruit. And then he fasted the next month by only eating dry leaves that fell from the tree. And then he fasted the next month by only drinking water. And then he fasted the next month by only breathing air. So at least theoretically, even if you stop drinking water, you're not fasting if you're breathing air. And supposedly some people live by just looking at the sun. They eat the sunlight, which is possible, but not very practical in this age. But Dhruva Maharaj stopped everything. He even was in trance. He didn't even bother looking at the sun. He stopped eating. He stopped drinking water. He stopped breathing. And he just meditated upon Krishna, which is the goal. Which is why that means no sense gratification. But if one is engaged strictly in devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, Krishna says one at once transcends the three modes of material nature and comes to Brahman realization. And then beyond that, one can engage fully in Krishna's service without any obstacle, without any other conception, without any other impulse. One is absorbed in another state of consciousness where material desires and impulses and conceptions don't affect one. So Ambarish Maharaj was at that stage. Krishna Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. He gave the intelligence what to do under those circumstances. Of course, Krishna was satisfied, but as we'll find out later, Ambarish, Durvasa Muni was looking for some pretext to attack Ambarish Maharaj, looking for some fault, and so he thought he found something, but because Ambarish Maharaj was faultless, because everything he did was for Krishna, Durvasa Muni learned a very important lesson, although it was a little painful for him. He was a slow learner. Took him a year to learn it. But eventually he got the message. And therefore he became a devotee of sorts, at least of Ambarish Maharaj. So we should also learn that ultimately we should accept everything belongs to Krishna. And we should find out what Krishna wants us to do. And whatever the intelligence Krishna is giving us, whatever we can receive, we should at least try to do that to please Krishna. Do it with care and attention, with consistency and enthusiasm, etc. And then Krishna will protect us, like he protected Ambarish Maharaj. But if we just theoretically accept everything belongs to Krishna, except for what Krishna gave me, and we try to follow Krishna's instructions, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, but we don't do it to please Krishna, we do it for some other reason, then we can't really expect complete protection from Krishna. As a matter of fact, our false ego will supposedly give us shelter, but that shelter will actually not free us completely from the material concept of life. One can become a strict follower of the Vedas through Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, but unless one becomes a lover of Krishna, his life is still unsuccessful. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna. What is the danger of not interrupting during the period of Dvadashi? Or not interrupting in time, in that precisely time?
Well, the Vedas there may be different levels, but just the fact that you're not following the Vedas, it says do this, and you don't do it, then you're violating the Vedic conjunction, and theoretically you're subjected to the reactions of lust, anger, and greed, because if you don't follow it, then there must be some other reason why you didn't do it. And if you are under the auspices of lust, anger, and greed, then it's inauspicious on every level, on all the kosha levels, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, Vijnanamaya, Pranamaya, Manamaya, and Anamaya. Then there will be some reaction to all the koshas. You might get sick, your mind will be disturbed, you'll lose your intelligence to some degree. But if you're transcendental to all these koshas, and you're in Krishna consciousness, then you won't be affected by lust, anger, and greed, or delusion, or anything else. You'll just remain in Krishna consciousness. So it doesn't really matter if you follow or you don't follow. But for materialists, it matters.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Hare Krishna, you said, Maharaj, that Maharaj Ambarish did everything properly because he did everything for Krishna's pleasure. So if we didn't do it everything perfectly according to Vedic injunctions, but we are doing completely with motive to satisfy Krishna, we are doing everything perfectly. Is that your point, actually?
Well, you have to actually satisfy Krishna, you have to have all sambandha, abhideya, and prayojana. Just by thinking we're doing it to satisfy Krishna is good, but we should actually have the conception, the realization that everything belongs to Krishna. And we should be working under the guidance of Krishna's representative, as well as under the guidance of Bhagavad Gita, Guru and Sadhu and Shastra. Then it's more likely that we're actually in the consciousness of doing it just to please Krishna. If we don't accept everything belongs to Krishna, and we're not working as a servant of his servants, and we just claim we're doing it to please Krishna, it's not a proper claim.
Thank you. And Durvasa Muni become devotee after that?
I don't know.
I didn't know. I mean, you mentioned that in the lecture.
Well,
he became
at least
devotee.
he surrendered to Ambarish Maharaj, who's a devotee,
in that sense.
Yeah. I don't know if he got into any other trouble after that. But Devasa Muni, we know he went to the forest when the Pandavas were here 5,000 years ago, and he was going to curse them if they didn't give him prasadam. So Krishna had to come and save Draupadi and the Pandavas by taking a little remnant from the pot, and Devasa Muni and his followers, they left. So I don't think he learned his lesson completely.
Online question.
Okay.
In commentary to the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.22, Vishwanath writes, by saying with great joy, it is indicated that even at this stage of sadhana bhakti, there are no difficulties. So question is, many devotees don't really have this realization that in sadhana bhakti there are no difficulties. So why in sadhana bhakti there is no difficulties?
Well, sadhana bhakti goes all the way from Shraddha all the way up to Asakti. So I imagine somewhere along the line, especially after you get up to Nishtha and sadhana bhakti, you begin raga nuga sadhana bhakti, ruchi and asakti, then there's no difficulty at that level. But even the difficulties in the preliminary levels are not really difficulties because they help one come to the higher levels. So they're actually opportunities rather than difficulties.
Another question. You gave me a reference from one book of Bhaktivinoda Thakura that on the level of Nishtha, the devotee can see Krishna within himself. Vishwanath, however, writes that inner and outside sputi comes after the level of prema.
No, I said, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, when you chant at the stage of Shraddha and up to the stage of Nishtha, then you get an opportunity to chant more, that's all. And when you chant at the stage of Nishtha, spontaneously you remember Krishna. Krishna appears within your memory. That doesn't mean you're actually seeing Shyamasundara in his original form. I mean, you are, but you're seeing Krishna's appearing in remembrance to different degrees. And at Ruchi, then you can actually feel Krishna's presence. At Sakti, you remember his pastimes. And at the stage of Bhava, you can actually feel your relation with Krishna. And at the stage of Prema, then Krishna actually reveals himself in his original form.
Thank you very much.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.